Good morning. And good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for those of you on Easter time, and welcome to Ricky's Kitchen. I'm Ricky McKenna. I'm a certified nutritionist and a chef and an author, and you can get my book on Amazon if you so choose, or you can let me know, call me, put something in the chat, and let me know that you'd like to order this with the spiral version, which is a heck of a lot better and easier for cooking. It is, yes, you can eat well and eat right and find your joy in cooking. So the book is on Amazon, and today we're doing not one of the recipes from there, but we're going to do a recipe that my son and I created because he's also a chef. That's his avocation, and he's absolutely phenomenal chef. And I didn't teach him all of it. He learned on his own, and I actually think he went to cooking school. So he's really a little more, he gets involved with recipes more. I like to keep things simple. He gets a lot more complicated in different things. But be that as it may, today we're going to make his Peachy Gazpacho. So I called it Z's Peachy Gazpacho. And since the temperature has been approaching and the heat factor has been over 100 in Houston for the last week, I decided that instead of doing the bolognese, we were going to do something that didn't involve cooking. So this one's real easy. The first thing I'm going to do is take my organic can of hello. It's Thursday. You'd think it was Friday. Diced tomatoes, and I'm going to wash the top because you never know what's been walking through the back of a store. So I always recommend soap and water on the top of cans before you open them. And so we'll do that right now. It's a really simple operation, and I don't like to take any chances with anything like that, especially in today's crazy world. So the first thing we're going to do is take our firm cucumber, and I've got an English cucumber, which is seedless, and I'm going to strip this off. And what we'll do is wash that as well. Normally I would use veggie wash, but on something like this, it's an organic one. It's organic, so I'm going to use it with the peel. But of course, I'm going to dry it off a little bit and cut off the ends since we have partaken of some of it. And chop that up. And now I'm going to chop it up roughly because I'm going to put the everything in the blender a little later when we get all the ingredients together. So let's just chop it up roughly. And I should have about a cup there. The reason I love this gazpacho is it's a little bit different. And the peaches just give it a sweetness. And of course, they're right in season right now. So that's one of the other reasons that I'm using them. And it's just a delightful way to make a dish that everybody loves. And you can use it, excuse me. You can use it as a main course, as a really light dinner or lunch. And you can also use it just as an appetizer. Depends on how much you want to put together. So we're going to take about a cup of the chopped cucumber. I'm going to add a scallion. And actually, I'd like to add more scallions, but since I only had one hanging out in the refrigerator, I'm going to take the scallion and take the gooey part off. That's the one thing I don't like about scallions and onions. You get those nice little filmy gooey things, and you have to get them out of the way. Okay. So there's my scallion. We're going to throw that in, just roughly cut. And part of the top. We'll get that in too. There. And I'm going to chop up some celery. As you can see, I'm not chopping it finely. I'm just roughly chopping. And we should have about a quarter cup of celery. And the recipe is on the email that I sent you. And you can eyeball this if you want to. It's nothing that's perfect. I'm going to use part of a leek because I want the flavors in there. And so I'm going to cut the top. Has already been cut, but I'm going to trim it and just, you can see what I'm doing here with the end of it. I'm going to cut into it this way and then slice off a little bit of the green. I'm going to make these a little smaller because they're pretty potent. And I like using leeks. Normally I would cook them, but for this dish, we're just going to cut a little bit of the top, and it's almost for color as well as for flavor. So I've got, I don't think I even have a quarter cup here. I've got a couple of tablespoons maybe. Now you can add garlic. This recipe does not call for garlic. If you want to add a little bit of the white part of the leek, that's fine. But what I'm going to do now is take my, take my lime. We're going to put in the juice of a lime. And I really prefer using my juicer. It's a lemon squeeze or lime squeeze. And because it really does get all the juice out of the fruit. And I do it carefully because every time I've just gone mashed with the thing on there, it squirts all over the place. And you want the juice in the bowl, not all over you or all over your counter. So if you haven't treated yourself to one of these wonderful gadgets, think about it. They're great. Okay. So we're putting in the juice, the whole thing. Now, some gazpachos I've found, if you use fresh tomatoes, which you can, and you cut them up, it gets to be a little bit juicy. But we're going to use a can of diced tomatoes. They're organic diced tomatoes. And this, as I say, this one's an easy one, so it makes life easier. Okay, so we've got cucumber, scallion, and celery in there so far, so it's pretty traditional. And we'll put the whole can in, juice and all. And I may have a cat come running in here shortly because every time she hears a can open, she thinks it's her tuna. Yeah. All right. And we're going to give that a little mix. I'm going to use my slotted spoon because I want to mix things. Now we could almost go ahead and use it this way, except that it's a little bit chunky. And for most people, it'll be a little too chunky. And if you wanted to make it as a salad, you could, but then I wouldn't put the juice in. So what we're going to do is, the recipe actually calls for chives, but since I'm out of chives, we're not going to use chives. I can use, let's see, what have I got here? Just to show you, you can use other things to substitute. I can put in a little, let's see what we have. I think we'll try a little oregano just for fun. And I do have fresh oregano, but I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit of dried oregano. Maybe a quarter teaspoon.
Ricky, what about the green part of the leek?
Yeah, but that's going to add the flavor as well. So instead of the chives, you can use the green part of the leek as I did, or you could add another scallion. So I've got about a quarter teaspoon of the oregano. And then we will take our peaches. Let's see. Okay, I've got two beautiful peaches. Make sure they're firm. They're ripe, but they're firm, and they can be just a little bit underripe if you don't mind them that way, which of course in something like this, you really won't tell the difference. And I prefer, personally, I prefer the yellow peaches, the yellow flesh, but that's up to you. And it's not going to do that. Sometimes when they're ripe, if you just cut into them that way, they will come right off the pit. But this one's going to be a little stubborn, so we'll just cut it off. And I'm going to chop it up a little bit, but prior to doing that, I'm going to blend what we already have in there before I add my peaches, because I want them to be a little bit chunky. So you can actually taste the peaches, because we're going to add some Tabasco sauce as well as salt and pepper. And I want the flavors to blend beautifully. So anybody ever do this before? And you can also use something like nectarines, just to get that sweetness and fruitiness in with the tomatoes and the savories of the other spices that'll be in there, the Tabasco in particular, and the salt. So I'm just going to cut this. There we go. It's almost a cup that I have here now, and I'm going to chop this up a little bit more. You can chop it up as finely or as chunky as you like it. I want it a little bit finer so that it will go throughout the whole bowl. And let's see, easy does it. Simple, 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 quick and easy. And I think I need to taste it. Yep, that's right. Okay, we're going to end up with about a cup of peaches. So I really don't need this one. I get to eat this later. All right. So now I'm going to take my blender after I put in a few drops of, it calls, excuse me, about a quarter teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to use the chunky salt, the kosher salt, or you can use any salt you like. I like the chunky one because it gives flavor. It gives a lot more flavor. I find that those particular, that kind of salt gives it a lot more flavor. And we're going to put in a little bit of black pepper. You can use black or white pepper. And now for the Tabasco, and I think I'm going to measure the Tabasco. And you can use Tabasco, or you could use something like Cholula or any other tomato-based salsa that you'd like. That will give a little bit of flavor. Actually, I'm going to use a tablespoon. You can use anywhere from a half to 1/3 of a tablespoon, and 1/3 of a tablespoon would be a teaspoon. So I'm going to add about 1/3. And why didn't I use a teaspoon? Just because I want to be ornery. It's been that kind of weather, so I can own up to that one. I'm going to give it a little mix. I can smell the Tabasco. And now it's pretty chunky. So I want you to see the chunky. And for gazpacho, which is really more like a cold soup in many ways, we're just going to make it a little more soupy. And if you haven't got a stick blender or immersion blender, think about getting one because they're absolutely fabulous. So we're going to give it a little bit of noise and carefully blend here. And basically, this is for the cucumbers. If you want to use a traditional blender, that's perfectly fine. You can put it in a blender, that works. But I like it a little bit chunky. Okay, I think we have it. Let's see what happens here. What I like about this one, I have one that's also with a plastic blender, the blender part that goes into whatever you're making. And I really prefer the stainless because it's much better, especially if you're doing something like a hot soup and you want to blend it before it cools off. I really prefer the stainless steel. So we'll put that in there. We do have a couple of chunks of the cucumber, but that's okay. And now I'm going to add my peach. And then we're going to see how we need to season. As you can see, this has taken me, what, 20 minutes? So if you're working or if you're coming home and you want to just make something quick for everybody to enjoy, this is an easy recipe. And as I say, I wanted the peach is chunky, so you actually get the peach flavor. Anybody have any questions or comments? Please open up your microphone and let me know.
I just enjoy watching you do that. You do it so seamlessly, but
Well, I've done it a few times before, Dr. Patricia. And this is really something that you probably enjoy. And it does keep in the refrigerator for several days.
I'm looking at my email for the recipe. You sent it already, you said?
I believe it's, yeah, you should have gotten it on
Okay.
the announcement for this morning. So check
All
your
right,
email.
sweetheart.
And here we have it. Let's see. I know.
Yeah.
How many does that serve?
Pardon me?
How many does that serve?
Well, I would say there's probably a good 4 cups in there. And I would start with serving. If you're going to use it as something, as an appetizer or the first course in a meal, I would do probably a 1/4 cup. It's pretty filling. And so there would probably be at least 4 to 5 servings here. Let's try it just for fun. And since it's a cold soup, I can use my plastic. Yeah, I'd do more than 1/2 cup. About 3/4 of a cup. And that's a nice serving for something that's cooling and refreshing. If you want to make it a cup, there's at least 3 more in here. So I would say you'd end up with at least 4 cups, 3 to 4 cups of the gazpacho using this recipe. If you want it for a main course and you want to do something with it, like even a piece of fish would be great with this. I would say use the 1/2 cup. You can serve 4 people with this easily. I'm going to give it a taste.
And I have another question about the fish.
Pardon me?
I have a question about the fish.
Oh, that would be on the side, not in it.
Oh, okay. Well, you had said something about you could almost make like a ceviche out of the fish if you put it in lemon juice. But it's separate. Is that separate from the soup?
No, I don't think I'd put it in the soup. If you wanted to do something like a ceviche, yeah, you could. I would use a white fish like a cod, but what you do is you cook it with lime juice. For example, actually it's on here. There's a suggestion on your recipe. It should be in the recipe that you got, where you take shrimp and you put them into lime juice for about 3 hours in the refrigerator, and you can rotate them in the juice and marinate them in the lime juice, which will cook them. That's the way they do fish for ceviche. You can use lime juice or lemon juice, but in this particular one, I would use lime juice, since we've already got the lime juice in here. And you can add that to it and make it a form of ceviche. So that should be in your recipe. If you didn't get that in the recipe, let me know, or just consider taking like a 1/2 pound of shrimp, cut them up into pieces, because it'll work a little better, and take them and put them in a bath of lime juice for about 2 to 3 hours. So, cheers. Not bad. Woohoo! I can taste the Tabasco. So, it's very refreshing. And if anybody's been walking around in the heat, this is something that'll really cool them off, but it'll give them a flavor at the same time. I'm gonna grab a piece of peach too to taste it. Interesting combination of flavors. And if you wanted to add something like a little cilantro, I would say chop it up roughly, just the leaves, not the stems, and roll those in as well. So you can interpret this yourself any way that you or your family like it. So that's basically it. And you could also do this with something like rolled up tortillas and another kind of bread. You could use a crispy French bread or something, or Italian bread like that. Even a garlic bread would be kind of interesting to go with this. You can sop up all the juices. Anybody have any other ideas? I'm open for more. Let's see what you would do with this.
Eat it.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Good idea.
How about the Canadian contingent? What would you do with it?
I don't know that I'd do anything different. It sounds delicious the way it is. I love that combination of, I had a relish that my mother-in-law recipe that she gave me that was peaches and tomatoes and whatnot. So it was more like a chutney than a relish, right?
Yes.
That would be very tasty. I love anything with peach in it.
And the thing is, you can serve it in any way that you like. You can serve it in a little dish. Of course, it's prettier than a measuring cup. Or you could serve it in the middle of a beautiful setting of, other vegetables or fruits. It's a nice afternoon refresher, or as I say, a nice light evening meal for the summer, for when it's hot. So I really appreciate all of you being here. If anybody has any other comments, and it's easy to clean up, by the way. One of the things I like about this is you can also use, as I said, nectarines. Another kind of fruit to put in, you could almost use apples. Of course, apples are going to be a little bit different texture. And I don't peel. As you noticed, I didn't peel the cucumber. And I certainly didn't peel the peach, because I believe that we need to eat the skins, which are part of the fruit or vegetable that have a lot of minerals and vitamins in them. And so I always recommend that, as well as the fiber. And last evening, I can show you a stuffed acorn squash that I made. And that's where I used the rest of the scallions, because I cooked up a bunch of mushrooms and scallions. And something like that might go with this too. That would be very interesting, warmed up. It's really pretty. If you give me a second, I'll get it out of the refrigerator. And this is what happens when I do a very quick recipe. I show you some other things that I've done. And sitting in the middle of a bunch of roasted vegetables is my stuffed acorn squash. Ta-da! And that's where I stuffed this with, I took button mushrooms, cut them up, and put them into a pan with some butter, just butter, no olive oil. And I sauteed those for a while, just for a couple of seconds, and then I put in 2 or 3 chopped scallions, as well as chopped garlic. And then I mixed all that up and sauteed it for a while. I took my squash and I pre-baked it for about 30 minutes, cut it in half. You take the seeds out. And in the spirit of not wasting anything, here are the seeds. They got roasted too, just with salt. But I believe in using every part of a fruit or vegetable that is edible. And so here's the squash. It's beautiful. It's a lovely little boat that's stuffed with the mushrooms, scallions, and garlic. And then I took some gluten-free bread and I cut it into small, like croutons, tiny pieces. You can shred it in or cut it in. And I added that to the mix. So we mixed up the bread, the mushrooms, the scallions, and butter. and sauteed that all together. Can you taste it now? With the garlic, and it was fresh chopped garlic. I put in about 3 cloves of garlic and mixed all that up. And when I put it in the oven, after the squash had been baked, and I had removed the seeds, of course, before that, I took it out. It was partially baked. I turned it right side up because when I bake squash, I cut it in half, put it open side down in a pan in about a ½ inch of water so that it doesn't stick to the pan. So it was pre-baked. I turned it right side up and filled it with the stuffing. And then I took some almonds that had been previously toasted, or you can use raw, sliced, or whatever kind of almonds you want, or other nuts. And I took about a tablespoon for each side of the squash. And I scattered the nuts on top and kind of pressed them into it. Sprinkled a little bit more salt on top of that and put it in the oven at 375 for about 20 minutes. So it finished baking the squash, and it baked the rest of the stuffing on top, and the onions and the nuts just started to brown. So it made an absolutely delicious dinner. And frankly, I cut them in half. So we actually ate a quarter each. It's a pretty good sized squash. So a quarter of that was very filling, along with what else is in this dish is a bunch of roasted red pepper, yellow pepper, orange pepper, yellow beet, and turnip that I cut into bite-sized pieces. When you bake something like this or roast them, this is turnip, this is yellow beet or gold beet. And all I do with that is put them on a baking tin or a cookie sheet, turn the oven up to 400, and just drizzle them with olive oil and salt and whatever else you want. Sometimes I use garlic. And you put those in the oven just as they are on 400 for about 15 or 20 minutes. Check them then. Now, the one thing that happens is your peppers, because we put them skin side down, will get a little browned. And it's absolutely wonderful because it brings out all those wonderful flavors from the vegetables when you roast them. And the other vegetables didn't get quite as browned, but that's okay. The peppers usually do. That's how you know they're done. You can flip them over at about 10 minutes if you don't want them quite as browned, and then put them back in for another 5 to 6 minutes. And you'll have a beautiful array of roasted vegetables. Now, what I did when I take them out, because of the olive oil, I usually cool them off on paper towels. So we let some of the olive oil, some of the oils come out. But you don't have to do that. If you choose to, that's fine. But that's one way to take a little bit more of the oils off. And re-salt or re-season as you see fit. So make it to your taste. But there's something else that you can do with your scallions, of course, and a few other things. In addition to putting something like this stuffing into a squash, whether you use acorn squash or butternut squash, sometimes I've taken some ground meat, whether it's beef or ground pork or ground turkey, and added it to the mix, but it does need to be cooked ahead of time. So that's where you get a lot of your flavor, because when you're cooking it ahead of time, you put it in a pan and saute it. You can use olive oil with any of the meats and use your seasonings however you like. I love garlic and a whole variety of things anywhere. Basil or tarragon is interesting because, especially with the vegetables, you can use tarragon. It'll bring out more flavors. And thyme, and whatever is your favorite herb, you can throw that into the mix too. You can also use something like a prepared sausage. You know, the sausage mix that comes in a package where you just take it out and put it into patties and cook it up, either a spicy one or a mild one. Those will work well in stuffing something like the squash as well. When you mix them up with a few other things, if you have some leftover rice, it's a good way to use it up. Put that in the mix while you're sauteing everything, and it will absorb all the flavors of the meats and the spices. Anybody have any questions?
Those are all great ideas. What's your method for roasting potatoes, like little chunks of potato? Is it the same time frame or is it longer?
Usually the potatoes take just a little bit longer, but it depends. Yeah, much longer than the peppers would, because
Yeah.
they're so thin. So I would say probably 25 minutes on the little potatoes, and those I would turn over. I use the little bitty ones.
Yeah.
And I usually cut them in half and put them in with, as I said, olive oil or butter, and those are great with parsley, salt and pepper, and a little bit of garlic. So instead of putting them in a pot and boiling them and boiling half the nutrition out, you put them in the oven, and they're much better that way. They can take on a lot of flavor.
Okay.
Thank you. That was a great question, Gal. Anybody else have any ideas they want to share?
Not me.
Okay, I know, I love the fact that Dr. Patricia likes to eat, and I do too. I am a foodie and I love eating. As a matter of fact, this will be consumed shortly after we are at a completion point. And I think I just might add some of my, what's nice about the vegetables, I might add some of my roasted vegetables on the side with the gazpacho, because the gazpacho is nice and fresh, and the vegetables have taken on the flavors when you cook them. And you can also do that with mushrooms, by the way. You can take your mushrooms and just take the stem out, make sure they're clean, especially if they're, if they're not shiitake. Shiitake mushrooms are grown on wood, so that they're not fertilized with manure or anything like that. But other mushrooms are usually fertilized with other things and they grow in dirt. So be careful with the mushrooms, and usually I wash them sparingly or use a wet paper towel or a mushroom brush to clean them off. And just, you can put those in whole and roast them if you want. I would start them with the top down and then flip them over, either way. So you can roast your mushrooms as well and add them as vegetables around your vegetable. It's a great vegan dish, all of it. And it's, the thing is, if you got a guy around or anybody else who really likes meats, when you do something like this, you get almost the effect as far as the taste and combinations as if you were to do it with some form of meat, but it's a vegan dish. So it's really very good for most people. And as a nutritionist, I would definitely recommend that. At least once or twice a week to have a vegetarian meal. And you can add, there's plenty of protein in there between the nuts, and there's good oils. And every vegetable does have a little bit of protein. So you're getting your protein. If you wanted to, you could actually, what I've found with something like this, if you take an egg and you fry it and you do it, not sunny side up, but flipped over, that on the side or even on top of it makes an interesting topper for something like the stuffed squash. Try it. All righty. Well, if nobody has any more questions or comments, I really appreciate the fact that all of you have been here, and just want to give you a look at one thing. And these can be purchased online from Ricky's Kitchen. This is one of my favorite aprons. As you can see, it says, "Everything tastes better with bacon." And I love to play on words. It's a great apron because it's big.
Yeah.
And I do have another apron that says, "Take whisks," my favorite tool. And I do, of course, recommend the book, which will give you at least 30 recipes. And it will give you some ideas of, excuse me, baking instructions and cooking instructions, especially for beans and legumes, which I find many people have a little problem with at times because they're not cooked well enough. And there's a whole thing about whether you cook beans with or without salt. I'm in favor of cooking them without salt and adding your salt afterwards. The reason being, sometimes with the salt, the beans will not break down. It doesn't break down the skins of the beans so that they actually cook thoroughly, and the gases are released when they're cooking. not after you've eaten them. So at any rate, it is Ricky's Kitchen. And I appreciate your being here. Come back again next Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. And comments are welcome. And again, I thank you all for being here. Have an absolutely fabulous weekend. And we'll see you again next Thursday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye,
you.
ladies.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's see. Does anybody know how to stop this? Okay. Right. Oops.